So this is where we get to when we look at the election. There's the campaign itself, and almost for the direction of the party, it's the least relevant part. It might have hurt them the most because late momentum hurts so much, but running a better campaign is, it just goes back to some competence and settling policy earlier and so on. But as to directions, I suppose, on policies, on the one hand, you go, well, the suburban strategy didn't work for whatever reason. Some people are going, well, we weren't, truly moving to the right or listening to these people. On the other hand, holding onto city seats hasn't worked either. So is it a case of you have to focus on both, one or the other? Where do they go to that sense, and how does that lead you on policy?
Yeah, I think that first and foremost, you've got to decide what it is you are. And I think that I have no idea what a modern Liberal Party is for. And I think they've failed to articulate that now across 2 elections. And if you don't stand for anything, then it's unlikely that anyone's going to stand beside you. I think the National Party now has big questions about what it does. And I wouldn't be surprised to see a real divergence in policy between the National Party and the Liberal Party. And I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. But they need to work out what a modern Liberal Party is. I think some of the Liberal ideas are timeless. They just need to find the language and the people to put them together. And I go back to what Gough Whitlam did in the lead up to 69 and then 72. He was very determined that it had to be the platform, the policy, the party, and then the people to put all those things in place. And you have to start with an understanding of what you are.
Yeah, and was that lost a bit? They got to the lead, the opposition strategy is really good, and then it was suddenly like, well, we just need a couple of things to get us over the line, and then it became, let's do some more cost of living.
They fell for that argument that, that oppositions don't win elections, that governments lose them, but you've got to have a proposition that people can go to.
And principle. Peter Dutton said I think it was January, no more sugar hits.
Yeah.
By election time, they looked a lot like sugar hits to me.
And big damage has been done to the 2 big equities, which you would be more than well aware of, Tom, and that John Howard always talked about. You've got to get the economy right and you've got to get national security right. You get those 2 things together, and they were the 2 things that you always thought a Liberal Party had. Well, I think that during COVID, they lost their brand when it came to we are the party of small government. They were the party of big government intervention. So you could no longer argue that they were going to bring down the cost of government. They got to a point where they could not even argue for a cut in the public service. Now, if that is not on page 1 in paragraph 1 of what a Liberal Party government does when it comes in, and national security, I think they lost their way on that.
Well, they announced their stuff in week 3.
They didn't look committed to it.
But even on that cut to the public service, it was unclear what it was, and then I kept hearing by the end it was 41,000 public servants out of Canberra, which would be a quarter of the city's workforce. And people can watch and go, who cares about Canberra? But that's torching a city, and they didn't add 41 in Canberra. So it became, the policy seemed to have so much around this mantra of Canberra public servants equal bad, that even though 41,000 extra were hired around the country, they were going to cut them all from Canberra. Didn't that sort of speak to, I don't know, it was almost rhetoric over detail? And
everything was a headline without a story. And then when you asked the second question, they had nowhere to go. So it did not look like, people tell me that they did do a lot of policy development, but there was so much friction between the campaign, between the people running the campaign and between the leader's office, that none of this actually ever surfaced. Well, look, show us the work, and I couldn't see any work. And I think they also got distracted by The Voice for more than a year, where nothing much happened other than they were fighting on The Voice. And if you think about that, that was defeated, actually, you could make the argument, on sound Liberal principles, which was that people believe that no group of Australians should be more entitled to something than any other group of Australians. You can make that argument, right? So they need to go back to those basics.
Okay, Chris Bowen is arguing the silent majority. There's a new silent majority is with him.
The majority is always silent.
I'm always problematic around any mandate, because there's always all these issues, and there's a swing of 3 or 4%, and suddenly every policy is a mandate. So I'll say that regardless of the issue, before people say I'm having a go at this one. So he says he has a full mandate on this. I guess it's interesting to look back at 2022, because I know the Liberal Party after that said, we won this, but this doesn't mean that everybody thinks we're doing a good job overall on climate and they're not concerned about it. Does this go the other way, that there are still people concerned about, regardless of what you think around renewables and so on, the rollout in particular, because that's what he was focusing on today, that still is something that's upsetting certain communities, and they don't want this, resentment to build up on it?
Well, Chris Bowen has a mandate to deliver cheaper energy prices, which is what he promised, and to get rid of the subsidies. And by the time they're finished, we'll have spent $6.8 billion on subsidies. When does the government get rid of that? because the price of electricity is going to continue to rise. One thing that we know for certain is that we haven't hit the transmission and distribution parts of your bill yet. We've only hit the wholesale price. So a big cost is on the way. And how do people swallow that? I think that, look, he has a mandate to continue on the path that he is on. It's just that the path that he is on is not being replicated around the world. So when we talk about net zero, you need to look at the countries that are actually doing it. Well, the United States isn't doing it, China's not doing it, India's not doing it, and Russia's not doing it. That's 60% of the world's emission. So what are we doing and what will it cost us become the very relevant factor. So I look forward to Chris Bowen being in this for another 3 years. I hope he lives a long life, and I hope he gets to learn that in the end, physics will decide what happens, not politics.
I guess the thing on this is, well, you said he's promised cheaper prices. He didn't before this term.
Oh, well, that's just it. But that was the promise. The pledge was that this will be cheaper and this will be greener.
But then the coalition, so you can't actually figure out the counterfactual.
Look, the thing is, the problem we've got is that, and this I think is a genuine pity, is that the coalition, I like Ted O'Brien, I think he put a lot of thought and effort into this, but the coalition never made the primary argument, which is what we are doing now is going to be very expensive. Then we need to look for alternatives, and the alternative down the track might be nuclear.
Or even willing to say they're both expensive, but this one's...
They're both really expensive. There are no...
Neither side will say that, oh yeah, this is expensive because this is a once-in-generation change we're trying to do quite quickly.
Mate, that is all I'm pushing for, is that people need to level with the Australian public about what the real cost of net zero is, and the fact that we've only just started.
To totally change the infrastructure from where I sit, it's both expensive. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right.
Concrete, steel, plastic, ammonia. We've got to work.
I've got to leave it there because I know you could talk on this all day. Chris Uhlmann, thank you.